Welcome to another episode of the Esther Krakue Show. Today we have the pleasure of meeting Chris Williamson, the host of the podcast Modern Wisdom, club promoter, entrepreneur, model, and really interesting guy. Thank you for coming, Chris.
Thank you for having me here.
So today I mostly want to focus on, your podcast because I think it's really interesting. And for anyone who hasn't listened to it before, I think it's a really good investment. It's had over 1 million downloads, so it's something that's definitely gaining traction. I just want to understand sort of your motivations behind sort of Modern Wisdom, because you talk about a lot of different topics. You had a porn star on one week. You talk about relationships for a whole series.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about sort of masculinity and the things that are lacking in our generation. So I just want to know what your motivation is with this podcast.
I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to share bandwidth or oxygen with the cleverest people on the planet. I
think we all do.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I get to really focus. I found that having a conversation for an hour that's very, very focused on what you're talking about, that isn't distracted, and that where you and the person that you're speaking to aren't playing a verbal game of tennis, you're both coming into it and trying to leave with 2 + 2 = 5 and trying to both come away better people. I just found it was so nourishing for me, which sounds a bit sort of spooky, but it just made me feel good to have these conversations like the one that we're going to have today. And the one that I had with a porn star, and the one I've had with Robert Greene.
Yeah, I got through like half of that, and I was just like, oh, Dios mío.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so.
You got to leave your virtue at the door a little bit with that one.
Yeah. I became like a Spanish grandmother, like, oh, Dios mío.
Yeah, exactly. You can watch it, but you can listen to it, but you got to do that.
Yeah.
Or you can watch
I watched it by
myself,
by the way, because if my family saw me watching that, that would be a very interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. But, so yeah, I enjoy talking to people, and increasingly I'm finding that the audience that I speak to in the UK are lacking a British voice about a lot of these issues. And that's everything. That's relationships, that's how to start a business and entrepreneurship, that's what it means to be young, that's psychology, that's space exploration, like everything that I talk about with people, everything's American dominated, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of big podcasters, great podcasters coming out of the US, but I do think that the UK is lacking a little bit on that.
Yeah. I mean, the topics that you talk about on your podcast, they're quite vast. You're not known as the podcaster that talks about vegetables or whatever. Is there a certain motivation behind actually covering a wide range of topics?
Anything which interests me. It's very selfish.
Oh, you?
Very selfish.
Yeah.
So I've always said since I started, if people want to tune in and listen, that's great. But I'm doing this because I want to have these conversations. And if they want to be a part of them and listen, then fantastic. But if no one listened, I'd still do it. And it means presumably there's other people out there who have the same mechanisms of interest that I do.
Yeah.
And so if I do it purely for me, in the most selfish way, you can tell I'm an only child, can't you? In the most selfish way possible. And 1.1, 1.2 million downloads now after 18 months, and it's quite modest, I guess, but it's fun and I enjoy it, and it means that I never get bored. So if I want to talk to someone, I want to do 10 episodes in a row about fitness, I can do it. Or if I want to do, I've done loads about space exploration and extraterrestrials recently just because I had some good guys.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, I can assume you hang around a lot of young people because, obviously you're a huge club promoter up north. What do you want young people to get from your podcast, especially the ones that, like the relationship series that you did, or, the ones you're talking about sort of exploring your higher self and getting into entrepreneurship and just really pushing yourself beyond what you think you can? What do you want young people to get out of that, especially the ones you hang around at?
So I've made a lot of errors, as everyone does, over the last 13 years, and I think that one of the ways that you can help yourself transcend the mistakes that you've made in life is to use those mistakes to help other people avoid them. And I'm constantly around. You're right, my business, I run club nights. I have about 500 students that work for us every single year between the age of 18 and 21, 22. And I know that I'm going to lose them at the end of that. So my sole goal now, apart from making money and filling clubs, is to get these people and to take them from being these filthy, rough-hewn rocks with no direction, and then just buff the hell out of them for 3 years.
For 3 years.
And then we release them back into the wild, and I watch these guys go and hold space in a business meeting or have some big Geordie bouncer screaming at them on the door of a club while 500 people try and get in. This 21-year-old, 20-year-old guy will just go, don't worry, he'll just completely take control of the situation because we've been able to, me and my business partner, been able to feed them with what they need. And I realized that doing that at scale with some cool, interesting guests was probably a pretty good use of my time.
I mean, what do you think is lacking with our generation? You know, especially with the sort of younger people. What exactly do you think is, you know, what is that change that you see, you know, after the 3 years of working with you? What is that change that you see? What do you think is lacking for there to sort of be a gap to fill?
So, what I think is lacking for the individuals is an explanation of how they should be able to set their sights higher than they already are. I think there's a lot of people in the UK especially who aren't prepared to give up the good for the great, and that's because not many massive businesses appear to be coming out of the UK. We're not like Silicon Valley. We don't have these like rags to riches stories just popping up all over the place, and that means that a lot of people don't have the same upward mobility that you might do. I don't know what it's like in America. People that are American might be able to tell me that it's different, but in the UK a lot of the guys arrive with us with their sights set here, and then I just try and completely take the lid off that and say, no, like you can do whatever it is that you want to do. You just need to ensure that you have enough agency. So high agency is another thing. It's the most valuable skill of the 21st century, according to my friend George McGill, and the ability to take control of situations and really go for things like that. So yeah, I think in the UK, it is, young people lack the drive or the suggestion that they should have drive. Almost, I think it kind of gets like pushed to one side as this is just capitalist bullshit. Like you shouldn't be searching for money. You should be happy with wherever you're at, as opposed to constantly going for more.
I mean, what do you think is the cause of that block? Because, I mean, from a little bit of my experience, I went to Bristol University, and you know, a lot of people in Bristol University are very sort of well off, come from really good families. And they just absolutely hate everything about well, the ones I experienced. They hate everything about capitalism. They hate everything about wealth. And I'm like, you wouldn't be where you are if your parents had the same attitude. You know, so for me, a lot of it is sort of that mental block of completely shutting out what they see as not trendy or what isn't in the sort of mainstream politics these days that's being targeting young people. But what do you think is that block? Where do you think that comes from?
I'm not too sure. I know I spoke to Zuby on the podcast.
Yeah, I watched that.
And I asked him, what do you think is the most woke city in the UK?
Jesus Christ.
And he said Brighton, Bristol.
I agree. Oh my gosh, I agree.
Which is weird coming from Newcastle, because anyone else who's from up north will agree it's such salt of the earth stuff up there.
Yeah.
Like proper spit and sawdust, people know that. It's crazy Labour. And obviously what's interesting is when we have a general election or Brexit vote or anything like that, Newcastle's the first one that comes out.
Yeah.
Newcastle's always the first one. I don't know why. They start at the top and go down or something.
You need to explain that to me. We'll explore the politics of that a bit later on.
But it just, that's the way it is. So in Newcastle, these well-to-do, I guess the more woke generation, I don't see that mechanism happening.
Yeah,
I just don't.
It tends to come up from the more well-off you are. It's in terms of the youth, the more backward thinking you are. I don't know where it comes from. I think it's it's too much comfort. Do you know what I mean?
So did you listen to my episode with Douglas Murray?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
he even spoke about you as well when we interviewed. He was like, "Chris is really intelligent."
I'm seeing him tomorrow.
Really?
I'm going to go for dinner with him after a thing. Yeah. So that's going to be fun.
Cut this out. This is like.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. We'll because it's a casual chat. But it's fine.
Anyway.
Tell me how dinner goes with Douglas.
Okay.
Seriously, he has such good things to say about you.
Cool. During my discussion with Douglas, and in his book Madness of Crowds, he talks about this absence of grand narratives that we have now. And it's the same as anything, right? Like if a news story comes out or if a rumor comes out about someone and then no one fills it with a counter news story, there's a vacuum that just sucks in gossip. And it's kind of the same with that. If you don't have purpose, if your mum and dad have got a trust fund with 20 mil sat in it, like what is your purpose then?
Wish.
That would be nice. But if that's what happens, like what's your reason to grind? What's your reason to get up in the morning? We did an entire series that never got released on purpose and meaning. And the tip of the spear that we worked out for that was that meaning is a reason to get up in the morning. And it's like, if you don't have that, then of course you just, I'll just do something that makes me look cool or makes me look like I care about other people, which is actually weirdly for a lot of people probably hiding the fact that they don't care about other people at all.
I mean, it's interesting you should mention that, because one of the things I spoke to Douglas about was, about purpose and having sort of a fight. Every generation has a fight, and generations before was against Nazism and fascism and all these horrible things of the sort of the 20th century. And I think transitioning into the 21st century, the modern day fight is as a result of being too comfortable. So the modern day fight is, you know, who goes into which slews, who pays on the first date, you know, is it sexist to open the door for a woman? You know, this is the this is the fight. I mean, is there a sense that sort of, you know, politics is kind of fulfilling the purpose of young people where it shouldn't? Because that's a huge sense that I'm getting, you know, find purpose outside of politics, find purpose outside of sort of what you think the modern day fight is. I mean, what do you think of that?
Perhaps. I think certainly political movements allow people to plant their flag and attach themselves to a particular team, right? So again, another Zubyism is that he says people can be religious about anything. Be religious about their football team or their diet or their political affiliation or whatever it might be, and perhaps that is what's happening. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's the case?
I think it is the case, and I think it's a bit sad. For me, it's one of those things. This is why I take a few days off Twitter once in a while, because I don't want to sort of get used to like always seeing what's the next political story, what's the next sort of outrage, and which sort of left or right camp. It really distresses me, because I don't want to feel like my life is in that vacuum of just talking about who's winning and sort of this political ping pong.
Is that because of the people that you follow or because of your interests?
I don't know. I've tried to follow a diverse group of people. I don't know if Twitter just doesn't like me. Everything that comes up on Twitter really just upsets me.
See, what's interesting is that doesn't happen to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel almost like watching a sitcom when I hear about these things. I hear about these issues of people blocking the streets with banners talking about whatever the next particular social justice campaign is. And for me, that it looks like watching a TV program.
Yeah, it's like from the outside.
It's so different to what I do. Yeah. If anyone who's listening is finding similar to yourself that their Twitter timeline is besmirched by people that they don't, just unfollow them all. I unfollowed everyone about a year and a half ago, and I follow 80 people, I think of which you're one of them, and it's like, fine, great. Now I've got 80 people that I follow, and I get to choose what arrives on my newsfeed. Follow them with enough dexterity and enough resolution.
I think I only follow about 80 people. I did make a point of that. I don't know what it is.
You just follow the wrong 80.
I think I follow the wrong 80. I'm going to have to unfollow some people. Sorry, Ollie. I mean, okay, in your podcast, you do quote Jordan Peterson quite a bit, which I noticed, I think in the first few ones that I watched. What do you think it is about Jordan Peterson that's you know, kind of caught on in the way that it has? It doesn't really seem like what he's saying is very groundbreaking. I mean, you know, I'm Ghanaian, I grew up in Ghana. For the vast majority of my life, what I was hearing was basically what Jordan Peterson was saying. So it was nothing surprising.
What, like?
You know, his about being proud of your masculinity. There's nothing wrong sort of with the masculine, the kind of yin-yang balance. I mean, Ghanaian culture is very much about sort of a balance. We're very much focused on sort of natural balance of things.
But do you think that that's the same in the UK and in the US?
No, that's why I can understand the bit of the culture shock there, and seeing, you know, the culture shock is seeing how it's sort of caught, you know, heat. But I want to understand what you think. Why has it become so popular? Because I'm probably not looking at it from your perspective, and I'm not male.
Yeah. I think it's in the Jordan Peterson thing is very interesting. For me personally, he was the first piece of content I'd seen that told me that speaking the truth was the highest thing that I could aim for. And increasingly I've realized that as long as I direct myself towards that, whatever my truth is with the podcast, unapologetically just doing it for myself. And if people want to come on board, then they can do. With the club nights, I'm just doing my thing, just being the best person that I can as a role model to the guys that work for us and the girls that work for us, etc., etc. So I think that Jordan spoke with sufficient clarity and precision in a way that is both prescriptive and tells you what you need to do, and also gives you context and allows to give you the surroundings that allow you to buy into it. So a perfect example is when you're scrolling through Instagram and you see an inspirational quote, but it doesn't change your life, even though that might be an entire life's wisdom from that particular person distilled down into one little maxim or aphorism or whatever it might be. Why doesn't it change your life? The reason it doesn't change your life is because there's no context. You haven't bought in. It's like booty picture, aphorism, booty picture. You get me? Like,
booty picture was like such a deep, like head, like, do you see those
hustle
things?
And grind, like Gary Vaynerchuk aphorism below. Yeah, I know. So I think one of the things that he's done is that he has, for men, he's reminded men what it is to be a true man, which, as far as I'm concerned, he's pretty much got on the money. Take control of the situation that you are in, be as strong as you can be, not because you should, but because you can. The same way as the unwilling hero, right, out of every single mythology story you've ever heard. It's not his job because he wants to go fight the dragon, it's his job because he can and because no one else can.
Yeah.
And if every hero goes and fights their own dragons, it raises everyone up. And I think this sort of zero-sum game that a lot of people, especially my industry, perfect example, big sort of anyone else's success is my downfall. That's a lot of what people see. Whereas with this, it's like, no. You just aim yourself at the highest good that you can.
Yeah.
Be truthful. Try and bear as much of a burden as you can. Be a good I mean, even his stuff with relationships. Think about his relationships thing. Be attractive to many women, but only be with one.
Only be with one. As a female, I will probably kill you. Just in the sense that you can't be too attractive to other women, because that's a problem for me.
I don't think that's something that you need to worry about.
No, he's not allowed. But why do you think this message resonated? Because what Jordan Peterson says applies to everyone. I read his book and I was like, wow, there's so many aspects of my life that I could really implement this, and it was really inspiring. But a lot of people that have sort of fallen behind Jordan Peterson are men, young men, sort of between the age of 20 and 30. Why do you think it's this demographic specifically that really sort of
they're very lost?
Absorbed?
They're very, very lost. I am that demographic, right? So when I started listening to his work and the work of Alain de Botton at the School of Life and Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro and other people that I felt spoke to me in a way that was meaningful, I didn't have direction. I don't have a specific role model, and it's not as if I'm going to grow up to be Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
But
we wish.
Well, yeah, no, I can grow a good beard, but that might be it. So, yeah, I think one of the reasons it landed with men was that at the moment there aren't a massive amount of positive voices for young men, men that are in that age bracket between 20 and 30. If you do not have a family, what's your purpose for being here? It's quite easy to be pushed into, you're a weekend warrior, especially in the UK, weekend warrior that lives for the weekend, goes out and parties, doesn't have any agency, doesn't have any higher goals. Or you could say perhaps you're a capitalist, sort of obsessive, someone who's constantly bothered about making money, or whatever it might be. There's not really someone who is a very supportive voice for the classic things that are masculine. And we're told, I'm just quoting from the book here, but we're told that we're tyrants in way in, and like young boys can be rapists to grow up, and that all of this sort of stuff. It's very difficult as a man to think, okay, so what are the typically masculine traits that I should try and embody? And it's very confusing. There's a lot of very mixed messages. Like in the media, you'll see one thing that says that
Gillette.
Well, perfect. And now they've done a big U-turn. And the most recent advert, if no one's seen it, go and have a look. It's a fireman getting ready, shaving his face so that his fire-saving safety mask can fit snug to his. And you're like, this guy breaks doors down for a living and fights fires. Like, what is more typically masculine than that?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Like it is this really big, messy situation that doesn't give men a lot of direction. And I think that he started to point people in, maybe not what's perfect. There's probably some holes in what it is that he says, but it's a lot better than nothing, because people were just spinning in circles before.
I mean, and something like Zubi mentions a lot is kind of this cultural war on masculinity. And it's something that I do think about quite a bit, because I do have a younger brother. He's smack bang in that age range. He's 20, he's about to come out of uni and do life. And I just think, if I was in his shoes, what message am I getting exactly? And if I didn't have the fabulous sister that he does, that lucky boy, what would I do? So with this sort of context that we have, and with all these 20 to 30-year-old men that kind of feel lost and don't really know sort of what message they're meant to be getting and meant to take on board, how do you think men should relate, or men in that age bracket should relate to women? And how do you think they
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, Douglas Murray again hits the nail on the head when he says that men are told that women are allowed to be as sexual as they want, as sexy as they want, but they must not be sexualized.
Yeah.
That is a very, very difficult
Awkward.
thing to hold in two minds.
Yeah.
And it is so nuanced to say. I used this example where I said, if I had a daughter and she was going out and she was 18 years old, I would tell her to dress carefully. And that is such a difficult sentence to get out without saying, hang on, so you fucking victim blaming? And you're like, no, I'm not. I'm just taking the most prudent course of action as far as I'm concerned. The world in the way that it is needs to be accounted for until it changes, not in the world the way that you want it to be. And you don't lead with the person who's more vulnerable, you lead with the people that are more in power. So anyway, I think that it's it's very, very tricky for men and women to have typical healthy relationships in that sort of a way now, because there's so many very, very competing narratives. And look, again, you know, I'm a part of this problem. Love Island. I was on the first season of Love Island.
I wasn't going to mention it, but
fine, bring it up. We've hopefully.
I wasn't going to.
It's all right. Hopefully, I've managed to give enough background for people to think, oh my God, now he's on. Anyway, what does Love Island tell us about relationships? What does that say about the fact that they're so easy come, easy go?
Yeah, they're very pretty people.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I'll ask you this. Do you think that there needs to be a more balanced representation of the UK demographic in Love Island in terms of casting?
Absolutely not. I like to be deep, but I'm also I like my shallow TV shallow. If I'm seeing something on TV, I want it to be sort of pretty and glamorized, just because I have enough common sense to know that this is not what real life looks like. I'd like to hope and think that the people watching it actually know this as well. You know, it's a kind of thing, like it's the same thing sort of in modeling, or like with Victoria's Secret, should you have plus size? And I grew up watching the Victoria's Secret fashion shows, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be them. My answer is always, I'm trying to find the most diplomatic way of saying this. No, I want it to be pretty and sparkly, and you know, because I have enough common sense and I have enough confidence in myself to not feel like, oh, because I'm not a 6 foot tall blonde model, that means they're taking shots at me, or they're saying I'm not the standard. No, that's just what they want. Yeah. You know, we live in a very diverse world.
I couldn't agree more. I'm glad that you said that, because the discussion about how representative Love Island should be under the shows like that is one that I don't think needs to have much nuance in it. Exactly. ITV2's goal with that show should be to make it as entertaining as is possible. Yeah. And if someone else wants to come in with a show that's massively diverse and completely annihilate their viewing figures, let them do it.
Go
ITV2
ahead.
do not have a responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, to make it representative. Now, that is very, very dependent on your worldview. And again, with this, we're having this conversation and I'm feeling myself edging toward the issues where I'm like, better not say that too much, or better not say that too much. But for instance, you could chop it down, you could say, should you have the starting 14 cast be all white? Probably not. Should you have the starting 14 cast be all disabled? Probably not. Like, but depending on how thinly you want to slice it, it's like, okay, why are there no gay couples on Love Island? You're like, right, okay, well you need at least 2. Because otherwise it's just like, you're the gays, like go over there, like exactly. It's you 2 together. And that, right, okay, well there needs to be lesbians, then what about the bis, then what about people who say, well maybe I'm asexual, or maybe I identify as a tree, or maybe, how quickly do you want to chop all of this sort of stuff through?
And I don't think people generally go into watching these thinking, oh, does this tick how many these diversity boxes?
I think you'd be surprised.
I don't really think, here's the thing, I think people either it's like sort of a lack of basic understanding of economics, because at the end of the day, everything is a business. You let businesses run how they want to run. If businesses choose a certain model, if they choose people that look a certain way, it's because it's a successful business model that has worked. And there are things about human beings, you know, biologically speaking, and in terms of evolution, that says actually we like healthier looking people, we like people that have clearer skin, we like people, and this is what people buy. And so businesses are not there to set the moral standards. Businesses are there to make money, and they make money based on our human tendencies. And I'm sorry if that's uncomfortable for people, but if Victoria's Secret actually doesn't want to have a transgender model, I mean, even thinking about the logistics of having a transgender model in Victoria's Secret is just, it's just uncomfortable, firstly. But if they don't want to do something, they shouldn't have to do it because it ticks, you know, how many diversity points. That's the nature of a business. If they were going bust because they weren't doing it, that's different. But if you're choosing not to buy something because you feel like it's a direct attack on you, then you should really focus on yourself and what's making you feel that way. And
that point that you've just brought up there really gets at the heart of what Jordan Peterson talks about. That it's personal responsibility, that you are a sovereign individual and you're supposed to take control of your own life. And I think, to bring it back to what the guys that work for us and the people who I, you know, get to craft into semi-competent human beings when they leave me, that is, I think, what we try and get at. We try and get at the fact that you are in control of what it is that you do, and if you do the best version of whatever role you've been given in front of you, and your capacity is as wide and as deep as you can, you'll probably be a pretty effective individual. We have these guys go out, and one of the guys, Joel's, just got placed at some trading desk in Hong Kong, like after doing a master's. He was with us for 4 years. James, another guy that was with us for 4 years, has just been placed at this huge leisure company, like dealing with 40, 50-year-old businessmen who've been there for ages in smoking jackets. And this young guy walks in and just commands the room because he has taken control. He has the responsibility on his own shoulders of what it is that he wants to do, and he has the capacity to do it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what's lacking. I think, for me, that was sort of one of the bigger culture shocks, is the lack of, appreciation of self. For me, the whole, especially when it comes back to the advertising thing, is I grew up in Ghana. I lived there for practically my whole life. I moved here when I was 14. If we had sort of an ad that showed only Asian models, then I can understand it, because it doesn't make sense. There's no, Ghanaians are not Asian looking. We don't have any Asian features. Like, it wouldn't make sense. But there is not a single person that would see an Asian ad in Ghana and be like, oh, this is a direct attack on myself. We just do not care, because there are more important things. People are thinking, how am I going to put food on the table for my family? How am I going to get this job? How am I going to...
In the Ghanaian language, do you have gendered pronouns?
No. No, we do not. The language is very basic, actually, comes to think of it. We don't have any.
So that was another thing Zubi brought up. He's an insightful little sod, isn't he? He brought up the fact that Spain, where they do have gendered nouns, was an area where this battle over language is occurring a lot less ferociously. Yeah. I wonder what would have happened in the UK if that was the case. It's the same in
France as well. When I was in, I mean, there was a bit of a movement in France.
France seems pretty woke from the outside looking in.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty. There's like a movement to sort of try and like de-gender the.
It's the hats, isn't it?
Oh my gosh! To be honest, whoever sat down and gave every word a gender in French, a language I love, but I hate you.
You got to learn double the number of words.
Oh my goodness, it's horrible. It's horrible. But once you get used to it, it's a beautiful language. But yeah, there is kind of a movement there to sort of wokeify the grammar, but you can't really. They
got more work to do.
Yeah, no, you can't really do. It's not going very far anyway.
Like the people that speak English have like 40 words probably like that they need to get through. Yeah. It's like, try that for chair. Desk. Yeah. Microphone.
Why is chair feminine? Yeah. I mean, well, I know why chair is feminine.
It would probably be. Yeah, it'd be a sign of the patriarchy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're not going to talk about that. Now I've lost my train of thought. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about was, something that I noticed that you work quite a bit on. And you're quite passionate about, is, mental health, especially talking about it. In terms of how it's being discussed, in today's culture, and how we're really talking about, I remember one of the videos you said is, I didn't know why I felt sad, but I was just sad. And I didn't feel like I had the right to say that I just feel sad for no reason, because it didn't seem like a reason enough to talk about it. I mean, why are you so sort of passionate about, talking about mental health, especially for younger people that, are either going to uni or they're just feeling quite isolated from the world and their family in general?
Because it's difficult. Because you can suffer at the hands of your own mind. And that sounds very, very backward. So I remember the first time that I ever went to go and see a GP. I've never been treated for depression. I've never been on antipsychotic drugs. I've never even had a single session of therapy, although I almost definitely should.
And I think your podcasts are therapy.
They are. Yeah. But that speaks massively to the typical male pushback against seeking help. The fact that I, for some reason, thought that I couldn't or shouldn't or whatever. And the one time that I went to go and see a GP, I sat down, and this is a while ago. Apparently the system has updated itself a little bit. This was maybe 10 years ago. Okay. And I sat down and I said, I'm a bit depressed. I haven't been able to get out of bed for a few days and I feel a bit bad. And she said, oh, so what's your depression about? I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, is it a relationship? Is it money? And I was like, no, it's just this kind of like nebulous existential dread that's hanging over me. Just this kind of guilt at not really anything. And she was like, right, yeah, but what's it really about? And, and then she like handed me this piece of paper and was like, crack on. So the reason that I think that it's really important to talk about the way that our minds work is because they're really complex, and people can have terrible, terrible days when nothing terrible's happened to them. And that made me feel guilty, which is a second order effect of mental health as well. Like, I would feel bad, I wouldn't get out of bed for a little while, I'd have a depressive period, and then downstream from that, I'd feel guilty about the fact that there's people in much worse situations than me who don't feel bad, and I'm like, oh my god, like I'm just wasting my life, and you just spiral down. Yeah. So I wrote a post recently about why we like people to think that we are normal.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's a perfect example. The fact that there's not much room for nuance anymore in conversations. Everyone wants to be cool, everyone wants to be accepted, but it's mad how many people who want to be cool and want to be accepted also want extraordinary results. It's like, no.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways.
No. Ordinary people get ordinary results. Yeah. Extraordinary people get extraordinary results. So I was kind of trying to, first, as a role model from the outside looking in, someone who probably has it sorted, was to tell people like, no, like it's still like chaos inside. I've just got some tools that have helped me to get through. And I've become, by taking control, by taking responsibility for things, by speaking the truth, by being around people that are good for me, by some typical sort of physical attributes with having a good sleep and wake cycle and diet and nutrition, blah, blah, blah. I've been able to wrangle that. But that it's still perfectly normal to have bad days. And again, especially for men, like, what does that mean? Like, as a young man, all of your mates are going out on a weekend, such and such has just bought a new BMW on PCP finance and blah, blah, blah. And there's you unable to get out of bed because there's this random black dog next to you that makes you feel bad. And I wanted to normalize the fact that you can be what appears to be a perfectly high-functioning individual. And it's another thing as well, and this speaks massively to the lack of nuance in the conversation. I love Mental Health Awareness Week. I think it's a great movement, but I think it is hugely lacking in detail and nuance. Yeah. Like, people are prepared to say, I feel sad, and that be the, like, man, I'm so proud of you, like, thanks for coming out. It's like, yeah,
that's
cool.
Not the issue.
That's awesome, but what were we saying earlier on? Context. People need buy-in to this sort of a thing, and that's why I want to be as open as possible, as completely transparent as possible about how it feels, about what depression feels like, which is, it's kind of like being morbid over the death of no one.
It's like a giant rain cloud over your head all the time. That's how I could describe it. Like, you wake up and your head just feels heavy. I don't know how any other way to describe it. And it's like you're just walking around with just a giant cloud.
My old flatmate said that it feels like drowning in thoughts, and I think that's probably not a bad way to put it. But anyway, like, you know, my point is that mental health is something which requires an awful lot of detail for people to really fully understand what's happening. And I massively appreciate anybody that comes out and says, I've had a depressive episode. I have, this is something that I'm not afraid to speak of. That is definitely a first step. But I feel like we're getting there. Like, it's okay to talk, fantastic. But, like, it's okay to talk in detail about depression. And I think that we need to hear that. We need to have more people talking long form about what it actually feels like to be depressed and about what they did to get out of it. Because that makes people think, oh my God, maybe this isn't a curse which I alone have to bear. Maybe this is just part and parcel of being a sensitive, complex individual like everybody else is on the planet. Yeah.
I mean, in your experience, how did you sort of overcome, you know, depression? Because there's a huge debate about sort of antidepressants and actually medication, and, you know, is it a lifestyle change or is it sort of actual physical, like taking medication? You know, what is your opinion on how to actually get over, and what was your experience of sort of transitioning past that?
So there's a scale from 0 to 60. Johann Hari's book Lost Connections. If anyone who has either an interest or is suffering with depression, Johann Hari's book Lost Connections is the single best read as far as I'm concerned. It's the Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow to Psychology for Depression. Like, just total 80-20 on what you need to know. Is it very
compressed then?
No, but it gets to the point. And he talks about this scale, 0 to 60. Antidepressants move you about 1 point on the scale. Changing your sleep and wake cycle moves you 6 points on the scale. So my strategies for it were, firstly, realizing the elements of my life which weren't very good for me. And that included the fact that I'm a club promoter, so I get ragged around by my sleeping pattern. That for a couple of months of the year, I would be eating like Budweiser and cereal for breakfast. Because,
oh my goodness.
Well, you're just typical party boy, right?
What?
I know. You wake up, you got a hangover, you knock a beer back to get rid of the hangover.
Why would you drink beer to get rid of a hangover?
Well, because it's 2 PM and I've just woke up.
Why don't you eat bread? I don't get drunk very often, but when I have, I've eaten very unhealthily.
So what I realized was I needed to look after sleep and wake cycle. I needed to get some outside exposure. I needed to make sure that my exercise continued to be stable the whole time. Mm-hmm. I needed some people around me that cared for me. I needed a job that I could feel I was contributing to a greater cause. I needed a passion project that fulfilled me spiritually. It's
quite a long list.
It is a long list. But if you start to chop that apart, like bit by bit.
How do you determine the people that care for you? Like, do you care about me?
Be friends with people that want the best for you. Not people that tell you what you want to hear. And that's very difficult to work out.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to tell a child and to placate a child by keeping to give it ice cream. You keep on giving the child ice cream, it's always going to look happy, but it's not what's good for it. Some of my best friends are the people that tell me no or tell me that I'm doing something wrong all the time. And I hate them for it.
And I think I've been quite fortunate in that I have friends, because a lot of my friends are Kenyan or like Ghanaian or whatever.
I was going to say, do you think that's a heritage
They
of the
do not
the
lie.
culture?
Oh my gosh, my aunt was here, was like, you've gotten fat, and I was like,
Oh my god.
thank you, auntie. The last time you saw me, you washed me in a bucket. Of course, I've gotten fat. Yeah, I don't know what like having friends or family that lie to you. I don't know what that means. Because
I understand. You're right. It's a long list. The reason it's a long list is because the brain is really, really complex.
Yeah.
More connections in a single square centimeter of brain tissue than there are stars in the galaxy. Like, how do you think?
Is that an estimate or is that an actual like?
Correct.
Really, I can believe that, to be honest. Yeah.
Like, if I take the happiest person on the planet, perfect example, did a podcast with a DJ friend who supports Eric Prydz around the world. He's second in command to Eric Prydz. He's living his dream that he's worked for 15 years.
Okay.
He had a psychotic episode and put every hair product in the Asda toiletries aisle on his hair, got a floret of broccoli, 48 dishwasher tablets, and walked out because he'd been on world tour for 6 weeks. That's what happens if you mess with your sleep and wake cycle and drink a bit.
Did he take photographic evidence of this?
No, he didn't. But my point is that you can take the person who appears to be living their absolute best life, mess with their sleep and wake cycle, their diet and their training for 6 weeks, and have them be put on antipsychotics. Like, and this guy's fairly stable, fairly well balanced, and looks like he's living the absolute dream lifestyle. But there's some really basic things, some really basic environmental changes you can make which improve the way that you feel. And I think that, again, when we're talking about people taking responsibility for things, if I say to you the reason that you're depressed is because of an imbalance in your brain, it takes all agency out of your ability to fix that.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily right. It's mad how many people probably have been put on SSRIs or antidepressant drugs when they don't have a stable sleep and wake cycle. They don't eat, they don't train, they don't have people around them that they care about, they don't have a job that they feel fulfilled by, they don't have a passion project that they feel that is a creative outlet, they're not getting enough sunlight, they're not spending any time in nature, like they haven't dealt with childhood trauma. Like, all of these things are just, they're hard and they're big.
Should we tick all those boxes before you recommend any medication? I think that's. I
think that at the very least, the medication should be used only in acute situations, and then you can move forward from there.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, before I get on to the quick fire questions, which I'm really excited to do for this episode, I just wanted. I scrolled through your Instagram, and there are a lot of comments from like what it looks like single women and some single men.
Yeah.
I'm assuming homosexual. They leave a lot of why are you still single? How are you still single? What do you look for in a man or woman? Assuming you haven't clarified your sexuality in that respect.
I mean, I've been on 2 different dating shows in the UK.
Yeah. Take
Me Out and Love Island.
I saw the Take Me Out hair.
Big hair, yeah. Good, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. It's cool. I like connecting with people, but yeah, there's some people I think that are hoping they're going to turn me when. Like,
what do you do when you see those comments? Do you like delete some of them or?
No.
Because that's really awkward.
Why?
It's just so awkward. That's all I see when I scroll. I'm just like, wow. And it's usually the same 10 people.
It's consistent. Yeah, there's some real hardcore fans. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just people. They're saying something nice. Like that. What they feel I am providing to them is, or anyone on the internet is providing to them, is some sort of visual gratification, stimulation, whatever it might be. Yeah. But then with some other people, they might not even follow me on Instagram, but subscribe to the podcast. And it's interesting to have those 2 different worlds colliding a little bit. And I think that's what is cool about someone like Zuby, for instance. Yeah. It's this walking oxymoron, this like paradox incarnate, right? He's just this guy who's rapper, but really intellectual, but kind of quite conservative in some of his thoughts, but also black heritage, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And you think, I don't really
You don't know
get
what
that.
box to fit him in, really, yeah.
So for me, club promoter who makes his money from people going out partying, but massive advocate for sobriety, for productivity. Yeah. Someone who does a podcast that focuses on intellectual health and well-being, mental well-being, but also models. Like someone who's like hugely against using social media as much as possible, but also has to for his work. Like and that's what makes it interesting. Yeah, but that's why there's nuance, and that's what gives you perspective. Because if I wasn't a club promoter for 13 years, I wouldn't be able to talk about sobriety to assist you in achieving your goals as effectively as I can. The same thing goes for, I understand what it's like, or why there are some difficulties in being accepted as someone who has things that they want heard, when people sometimes perhaps just look at how you look.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
All right, are you excited for this? Ready?
Quick fire round.
Quick fire round. Okay, right. Mayonnaise or ketchup?
Ketchup.
Okay. North or south?
North.
No.
Come
Obviously.
on.
Oh my god. You're in London. You could at least pretend.
Nah.
Oh my gosh.
Find me in Winterfell.
This is. Oh, I did not hear that.
Yes, you
especially
did.
after that last season.
You did.
All right, I'm gonna ask this question for all your drooling fans on Instagram. Blonde or brunette?
Blonde.
Drinks or dinner?
Dinner.
Corbyn or Boris?
Don't care.
I didn't hear that. That wasn't the question. Corbyn or Boris?
Boris. He's funnier.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's a bit of a light one. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Chris.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And catch him on his podcast, Modern Wisdom. I highly, highly recommend it. I love listening to it. And skip the porn slow one.
Peace.